When people hear the word Masonic symbols, they imagine secret rooms, rituals, hidden handshakes. That's already a mistake. The most important Masonic symbols are not hidden at all. They are placed where you walk every day, where you work, where decisions are made. Architecture was never just about buildings. It was always about behavior. Long before modern psychology, power structures understood something very simple. Space shapes the mind. This is why certain visual patterns appear again and again in places of authority. Banks, courts, government buildings, corporate headquarters. Perfect symmetry, black and white contrast, geometric precision. These are not artistic preferences. They are psychological tools. Black and white represents duality. Order versus chaos. Right versus wrong. You are either inside the system or outside it. Your brain reacts to this instantly, even if you don't consciously notice it. Studies in environmental psychology show that symmetrical, high-contrast spaces increase compliance and reduce emotional resistance. In simple terms, you are more likely to obey rules in spaces that feel ordered, cold, and absolute. That is why these patterns are almost always placed under your feet. Floors, not walls. You stand on them. You walk across them. You submit to the space without thinking about it. This isn't symbolism for decoration. It's symbolism for conditioning. Masonry didn't invent this language, but it preserved it and standardized it. The same visual code appears across centuries, countries, and systems of power. And here's the part most people never consider. You don't need to be a Mason for these symbols to work on you. You only need to exist inside the space. Modern institutions still use the same visual logic because it works. Not magically, psychologically. That's why these symbols survive revolutions, governments, and ideologies. Because power changes faces, but systems rarely change structure. Once you start noticing this, you realize something uncomfortable. You are not surrounded by random design. You are surrounded by decisions made long before you were born. And this is where most people still don't get it. They think symbols only work if you understand them. They don't. Most of the time, symbols work precisely because you don't think about them. Look at how often black and white appears in places where rules matter. Banks, courts, corporate offices. Not colorful, not warm, but white. Straight lines. That kind of environment doesn't invite questions. It invites compliance. And you can feel it. Even if you never stop to analyze it. You walk slower. You lower your voice. You follow instructions without arguing. That's not an accident. Modern psychology calls this environmental conditioning. The idea that space influences behavior more than words. Masonry understood this long before psychology gave it a name. They didn't need to convince people. They designed spaces where obedience feels natural. And here's something interesting people rarely talk about. These symbols didn't stay inside lodges. They moved outward. Into institutions. Into corporate culture. Into everyday life. That's why you don't need to search for hidden signs. You see them every day. Look at how often leaders stand on black and white floors. How often official entrances are perfectly symmetrical. How often authority is framed dead center, never off balance. Your brain reads that instantly. Balance equals control. Symmetry equals order. Order equals legitimacy. Even if you've never heard the word Masonry in your life. And this is where people usually say, "Hey, but isn't this just design?" Sure. But design is never neutral. Someone always decides what feels normal. And those decisions tend to survive generations. Governments change. Logos change. But the visual language stays almost identical. That should already tell you something. Because trends don't last centuries. Systems do. Once you notice the spaces, you start noticing the people inside them. Power is almost never framed by accident. Centered. Stable. Balanced. People without power are framed differently. From the side. From above. Emotion. Your brain reads this instantly even if you don't think about it. And then you notice the hands. This is where it becomes obvious. The same gestures. The same restraint. The same calm movements. Different people. Different countries. Different roles. But almost the same body language. This doesn't happen naturally. It's trained. The same rules apply to camera angles. Upward angle means authority. Downward angle means control. Everything is designed to feel normal, balanced, acceptable. And once you see this pattern, you can't stop seeing it. And once you start paying attention to spaces and people, the symbols stop feeling mysterious. They start feeling obvious. The most common one is black and white. Not as a logo. Not as decoration. But as structure. You see it in banks, courts, corporate buildings, government halls. Floors especially. And that's not an accident. Black and white creates a psychological boundary. It forces the brain into binary thinking. Right or wrong. Allowed or forbidden. Inside or outside. When you stand in a space designed like that, your behavior changes automatically. You lower your voice. You wait to be told what to do. You don't challenge the environment. That's why these patterns are almost always under your feet. You don't look at them. You submit to them. Another symbol people overlook is symmetry. Perfect symmetry doesn't feel creative. It feels authoritative. Your brain associates symmetry with order, stability, control. That's why leaders are almost always framed dead center. And why entrances to institutions are never chaotic or irregular. Symmetry tells you one thing. This place is not negotiable. Then there's geometry. Straight lines. Sharp angles. Repetition. These shapes remove emotion from space. They reduce warmth. They discourage individuality. That's useful if you want people to behave predictably. You'll notice that places meant for obedience look very different from places meant for comfort. Compare a government building to a cafe. Or a bank to someone's home. One invites compliance. The other invites expression. That difference is intentional. And here's the part most people miss. You don't need to understand the symbol for it to work. This isn't about belief. It's about exposure. The human brain adapts to environments faster than it adapts to ideas. If you spend enough time inside ordered, rigid spaces, your behavior adjusts to match them. That's why these symbols survive political changes. Why they remain the same across countries. Why different systems use almost identical visual language. It works. And Masonry didn't invent this language. But it preserved it, formalized it, and passed it forward. That's why the same visual code keeps appearing. Not because everyone is a Mason, but because the system itself was built using that code. Once you understand that, the symbols stop feeling secret. They feel structural. They're not there to be noticed. They're there to shape behavior. And the moment you realize that, you start seeing them everywhere. What happens when someone steps outside the system is never dramatic at first. There are no alarms. No public punishments. No obvious consequences. What happens instead is something much quieter. Access disappears. Doors stop opening. Invitations stop coming. The system doesn't attack you, it simply withdraws support, and most people don't even realize it's happening. That's why these symbols still matter today. Not because they're ancient or mysterious, but because the structures they represent are still active. Modern power doesn't rely on force, it relies on participation. As long as you move inside the system, everything feels normal, predictable, safe. The moment you step outside even slightly, you feel resistance. And here's the uncomfortable part most people never talk about. That feeling of powerlessness so many people have today doesn't come from weakness. It comes from conditioning. From spending your entire life inside spaces, systems and rules designed to be unquestioned. When order surrounds you long enough, you stop imagining alternatives. That's the real function of these symbols. Not to be worshipped, not to be feared, but to quietly remind you where you stand. And once you understand that, the symbols lose their mystery. What remains is the system itself. Still working, still shaping behavior, still invisible to most people.